My name is Helena Moore, and for most of my life, I've been the one everyone overlooked. The quiet daughter, the forgettable sister, the woman in the corner cleaning up after the party, while the spotlight clung to my younger sister like perfume. Her name is Monica, and to hear her tell it, she's the sun the rest of us orbit. The last time I saw my family, it was after my father's funeral. A small gathering at my mother's house, some wine, catered food, and the same sharp-edged laughter I grew up around. I stayed near the kitchen, hoping to go unnoticed. But Monica spotted me, and with a glass in one hand and a smirk in the other, she called out to the whole room, "Helena's still doing clerical work at the courthouse, right? What's it like to stamp papers for a living?" Everyone laughed. Even my mother chuckled softly. I didn't say a word. I just set down my glass of water, nodded politely, and left without finishing my plate. 7 days later, Monica walked into a courtroom as a defendant in a high-profile case, heels clicking, head high, confident as ever. She didn't even glance at the bench. Why would she? In her mind, I was still the invisible sister. That is, until the jury foreman rose, faced the room, and said, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Helena Moore presiding. Growing up, I learned early that silence was safer than speaking. Monica, my younger sister, had a voice that lit up rooms. I had a presence that made wallpaper feel crowded. My parents adored her. My father used to call her the firecracker. Bold, brilliant, unforgettable. And me? I was steady. The kind of label that sounds like praise, but feels like a quiet dismissal. At school, I buried myself in books. Law fascinated me. Not the flashy kind, but the structural kind. Order, evidence, truth. While Monica strutted across talent shows and pageants, I found sanctuary in the library. I got into Yale on merit alone. No one noticed. When Monica got into a mid-tier liberal arts college, the whole family threw her a party with banners and champagne. I remember sitting on the couch, holding a solo cup of flat soda, pretending to smile. Monica always knew how to shine, and she wielded that like a weapon. She became a media attorney, handling celebrity cases, appearing on panels, dropping designer labels in every sentence. She posted curated snapshots of her power lunches and weekend wine escapes while giving interviews about women in law. Me? I clerked for a federal judge, then worked my way up as an assistant U.S. attorney. 12 years, hundreds of cases, late nights, no vacations. I rose, one motion at a time, because I believed in the system, in fairness. I prosecuted real crimes, human trafficking, financial fraud, public corruption. But not once did anyone in my family ask what I did. When they spoke of lawyers, they meant Monica. One year, I flew back for Thanksgiving, my first visit in 3 years. Monica arrived in a Porsche rental, wearing a coat that looked like it cost more than my apartment. At dinner, she clinked her wine glass and joked, "Helena's still in public service. Must be exhausting working for pennies, huh?" I laughed politely. No one else thought to defend me. My mother passed the cranberry sauce like nothing had happened. After that, I stopped coming home. I kept rising. I built a reputation, quietly, meticulously. My name came up for a federal judgeship after a successful corruption trial against a sitting congressman. I almost didn't accept it. Part of me still felt like that girl in the corner, the invisible sister. But another part, older, stronger, said, "You've earned this." I was sworn in at 40, and the robe felt heavier than I imagined, not in weight, but in meaning. And still, I didn't tell my family. Why would I? They never asked. They never really saw me. And some part of me, twisted though it may be, wanted to see how long they'd keep looking past me before they realized I'd disappeared. So I stayed silent. I did my work. I presided over cases that would change people's lives forever. My name was printed in legal journals. My courtroom became a space for fairness and restoration. And back home, I'm sure Monica still told people I was doing paperwork. Then came the phone call. A case file landed on my desk, and I recognized the name before I saw the photo. Monica, charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and misuse of client funds. I almost thought it was a mistake, but no, her signature was there. The case was real, And so was the fallout. She was due to appear in court within 2 weeks. I recused myself immediately, of course. I couldn't oversee a case involving family, but fate has a strange sense of irony, because even if I wouldn't pass judgment that day, I would still be the one standing in that courtroom when she walked in. I remember the moment I finally walked away. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation or screaming match. It was quiet, like most of my exits. My mother had called to say Monica needed help finalizing a mortgage on her new penthouse in Manhattan. The bank needed a co-signer. Monica had maxed out her existing lines of credit with her designer lifestyle and high-stakes networking dinners. She just needs someone responsible, my mother said sweetly. And that's you, Helena. You've always been dependable. I was stunned. Not angry, just tired. Tired of being the reliable afterthought. I told her calmly that I wouldn't be signing anything, that I wasn't comfortable being financially tied to Monica, that I wasn't a bank. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted just long enough for my mother's tone to harden. "So that's a no?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "It's a no." What followed was predictable. I was accused of being cold, jealous, ungrateful. I listened, thanked her for calling, and hung up. That was the last real conversation I had with anyone in my family for nearly a decade. They didn't follow up. No one asked where I went or what I was doing, and I didn't volunteer. I moved cities, bought a small home with my own name on the deed, started volunteering at youth legal aid clinics on weekends. I lived a life rooted in purpose, not applause. People sometimes ask if it was lonely. The truth is, it wasn't. Loneliness is when you're surrounded by people who refuse to see you. Solitude? Solitude was peace. When the call came about the judgeship, I thought of my father. He passed before I was appointed, but even if he had been alive, I doubt he would have understood what it meant. I wasn't flashy. I didn't have Monica's flair. But I had integrity. I had persistence. And, as it turned out, I had power. The kind that doesn't need to be announced to be felt. I didn't send out a family notice when I took the bench. No social media post, no holiday letters. I'd already mourned the loss of their approval years ago. I didn't need them to be proud of me anymore. I had found something better, self-respect. But I won't lie. When I saw Monica's name on that case file, something in my chest tightened. Not joy, not vengeance, just inevitability. The kind of full-circle moment that life hands you when it's ready to test your healing. She was being brought up on multiple counts tied to her firm's financial mishandling of celebrity retainers. It had made the news, but barely. She'd leveraged her contacts to suppress the worst of it, but it was too big to disappear completely. I called the clerk's office and had myself recused immediately, citing conflict of interest. Judicial ethics were clear. I could not and would not oversee her case, but I was still required to be present during the formal arraignment and assignment of judge. That day, I'd take the bench, perform the official transfer of the case, and step aside. I didn't know if Monica even knew who the presiding judge was supposed to be. Odds were, she didn't care. I was still Helena the clerk, in her mind. A footnote. That morning, I dressed like I always did. Black robe, hair back in a tight bun, no makeup beyond the standard court tones. As I walked down the corridor toward my courtroom, every step echoed with a strange clarity. Not nerves, not excitement, just closure. I stepped into the chamber, sat behind the bench. The bailiff gave me a respectful nod, and as the doors opened and Monica entered, I didn't flinch. I just waited for the foreman to rise and speak the words I had carried in silence for years. All rise, the Honorable Judge Helena Moore presiding. I hadn't planned on attending the memorial dinner after my father passed. It had been years since I'd seen any of them, and I knew what to expect. Monica playing hostess, my mother playing blind, and a room full of people who remembered me as little more than Monica's odd older sister. But grief has strange pull. I respected my father, even if he never truly saw me. So I went. Quietly, respectfully, like always. The house hadn't changed. Same floral wallpaper, same furniture wrapped in plastic, like it might still be worth something. The living room buzzed with familiar voices. Uncles, cousins, people I hadn't seen in over a decade. Monica moved through the crowd like a queen at a gala. She wore black, of course, but it was tailored, sleek, dramatic. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks, and people followed her with their eyes. She saw me before I had a chance to find a corner. Her eyes lit up, not with affection, but the kind of amusement that predators reserve for prey that returns willingly. "Well, well, look who decided to show up," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I didn't know the courthouse let you out early these days. Did they finally run out of paper for you to stamp?" A ripple of laughter moved through the room. I felt every giggle like a needle beneath the skin. I smiled, not out of kindness, but survival. "Hi, Monica." She hugged me, all performance. "I'm just teasing. It's so good to see you," she cooed, then added under her breath, "Did you bring your cats?" The rest of the evening passed like a slow leak. I stayed close to the kitchen, helped replenish trays, avoided the wine. My mother barely spoke to me, just a nod, a passing glance, like I'd chosen exile and shouldn't expect welcome. Someone asked if I was still doing something with the courts. I said yes and left it at that. Toward the end of the evening, Monica tapped her glass again. Of course she did. "I just want to say how grateful I am to everyone who showed up for Dad. He meant the world to me," she said, voice shimmering with false sincerity. "And of course, we're especially lucky to have my big sister here tonight. Helena's still working in, what is it again? Filing? Archiving?" The crowd chuckled, some nervously, some freely. She wasn't even drunk. This was just sport to her. "Must be humbling, doing all the paperwork while the rest of us chase real cases," Monica continued, swirling her wine. "But hey, someone has to hold the stapler, right?" My hands clenched under the table. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't give her what she wanted. Instead, I stood, walked to the sink, rinsed my plate, and left. No grand exit, no slamming doors, just silence. The only kind of defiance she never knew how to fight. What Monica didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 4 days earlier I had signed a federal recusal form. Because in less than a week, her name would be listed as the lead defendant in a case I could not legally preside over, but I would still open. She thought she'd crushed me that night. She thought she'd won something, but real power doesn't shout. It waits. And in my courtroom, silence would speak louder than her mockery ever could. The courtroom was already half full by the time I stepped through the side entrance reserved for judges. It was a high-profile case. Celebrities, publicists, even a few reporters trying to blend in despite the strict rules. The gallery buzzed with low conversation. Most of them didn't know Monica personally, but they knew the name. She'd made herself loud enough to be heard in circles far above her station. I took my seat behind the bench, black robe crisp, face composed. There was no anger in me that day, just clarity. The bailiff leaned in. "Defendant's counsel just arrived. She should be here any minute." I nodded. "Let's begin when ready." 2 minutes later, the side door opened. Monica walked in, flanked by 2 defense attorneys in tailored suits. Her hair was glossy, her heels sharp. She looked like she was arriving at a luncheon, not an arraignment. She didn't glance toward the bench. She was too busy scanning the gallery for familiar faces, for cameras, still performing. Then the jury foreman rose as instructed, and his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "All rise, the Honorable Judge Helena Moore presiding." She froze. I watched it register second by second. First, confusion, then disbelief, then panic, quickly masked by a thin smile. But I could see the flicker in her eyes, the unraveling. I didn't flinch. "Be seated," I said, voice even. "This court is now in session." The next 10 minutes were procedural. I read the charges aloud: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and misappropriation of client funds. Monica's firm had funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars through shell accounts under celebrity client names, some of whom had already agreed to testify. The evidence was overwhelming. Her attorney entered a plea of not guilty. I responded accordingly. Then came the formal reassignment. "Due to personal conflict of interest," I said, pausing slightly, "this case will be reassigned to Judge Terrence Ramos." I will recuse myself in accordance with judicial ethics." Monica's lawyer barely looked up, but she did. Her eyes locked on mine for the first time in years, not in dominance, not in mockery, but in stunned silence. She hadn't known. She had no idea who I'd become. And in that silence, something shifted, not just in her, but in me. Because for the first time, she wasn't speaking, she wasn't performing, she was just present, small, real. I tapped the gavel once. "Court adjourned." The bailiff called the next docket. I stood, walked back into chambers, and shut the door behind me. Alone again, but this time not lonely, because something had settled. Not revenge, not even triumph, just truth. That was the last time I saw Monica face to face. She didn't reach out after that, not for months. The trial proceeded under Judge Ramos, and though I had no legal involvement, I followed the transcripts quietly. She was found guilty on 3 counts. She didn't serve time. Probation, fines, professional disgrace. But she lost her license. Her firm dissolved within 6 months. Her name stopped appearing in magazines. The interviews ended. The spotlight flickered out. And still, I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. But I didn't need to. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand tall in the room where they once laughed at you, wearing the robe they never imagined you'd earn, and speak the truth they spent years trying to silence. 3 months after the verdict, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real handwritten envelope delivered to Chambers, addressed simply, Judge Helena Moore. The handwriting was unmistakable. Monica's. Still dramatic, still overly looped, still craving attention, even on paper. I hesitated before opening it. For days, I let it sit untouched on the edge of my desk, like a ghost unsure of its welcome. Part of me didn't want to know what it said. Another part, the younger sister, who once longed for acknowledgement, still hoped. Eventually, I opened it. It wasn't long, barely 2 paragraphs. Helena, I don't know who you are anymore. But maybe the truth is, I never did. Maybe none of us did. I thought you were small because you stayed quiet. I thought power only came with applause. I was wrong. You didn't humiliate me. You didn't have to. You just stood there. And that was enough to undo everything I believed about myself. I don't know if I'm sorry enough, or if that word even matters anymore. But for what it's worth, I see you now. Monica. I read it twice. Not for clarity, but for weight. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't making excuses. And maybe, in its own fractured way, that was the most honest thing she'd ever given me. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her. I didn't. Not anymore. That feeling had burned out long ago, leaving only something quieter. Something like release. People always talk about justice like it's a thunderclap, a verdict, a sentence, a punishment. But sometimes justice is softer. It's the moment you realize you've already won, not by breaking someone else down, but by standing up without apology. I didn't need Monica's apology to be whole. I didn't need my mother's approval, or my father's recognition, or the room to stop laughing. I'd spent years thinking success was something you had to shove in people's faces, just to be seen. But I was wrong too. Success, real success, is silent. It walks into the room without needing permission. It doesn't announce itself. It simply exists. These days, I still take the bench 4 mornings a week. I still volunteer with young women in law on Saturdays. I still live alone in my small house with quiet bookshelves and a garden that refuses to bloom on time. But now I breathe differently. Not heavier, not harder, just free. There's a photo on my desk, taken on the day I was sworn in. I'm wearing the robe, holding the Constitution, surrounded by colleagues who know my name, not because I asked them to, but because I earned it. Sometimes I look at that photo and wonder, what would that little girl version of me say? The one who sat alone on the couch at Monica's celebration, sipping flat soda in silence? Maybe she'd say, "You didn't disappear, you just became someone they couldn't recognize." And maybe that's the kind of justice that matters most.